Step back in time to the 1970s, a wild, wonderful era when America's restaurants weren't just places to eat, but full-blown adventures. Forget minimalist menus and quiet dining rooms. The 70s were all about spectacle, fantasy, and pushing every boundary of taste and design. From haunted caves to dining rooms full of goats, these themed restaurants turned every meal into a show, every dinner into a story. So, buckle up as we walk through bead curtains, past tiki torches, and into the strangest, most unforgettable dining destinations ever dreamed of. Here are the top 20 most bizarre theme restaurants of the 1970s. Casa Bonita. If you grew up in Colorado or just passed through, there's a good chance you were dazzled and maybe overwhelmed by Casa Bonita. This sprawling pink palace wasn't just a restaurant. It was a Mexican-themed fever dream. Inside, you'd find waterfalls, cliff divers plunging into indoor pools, puppet shows for the kids, and mariachi bands roving between tables. There were caves to explore, a haunted Black Bart's cave, and arcade rooms to burn off that sopapilla energy. For many, the food took a back seat to the spectacle. Casa Bonita was where a regular dinner turned into a family event that felt more like a trip to Disneyland than a local eatery. And after a massive restoration, it's still drawing crowds who crave that blend of nostalgia, chaos, and pure magic. The Tonga Room. You haven't really dined tiki until you've sipped a Mai Tai in the Tonga Room, deep inside San Francisco's historic Fairmont Hotel. Open since 1945, but truly peaking in the 1970s, this restaurant is a Polynesian fantasy come to life, complete with bamboo huts, thatched roofs, and a literal lagoon in the middle of the dining room. Every 30 minutes, an indoor thunderstorm erupts with rain and lightning effects, and a floating bandstand drifts across the pool. Designed by a former MGM set designer, every inch screams movie magic. The menu? Hefty on rum drinks and poo-poo platters, of course. The Tonga Room wasn't just dinner, it was a vacation, a spectacle, and a San Francisco icon all in one. Magic Time Machine. At Magic Time Machine in Texas, the waitstaff didn't just take your order, they became your entertainment. One night, your server might be Alice in Wonderland, the next, Spider-Man, or even Jack Sparrow. Themed rooms ranged from a carousel to a giant salad bar served out of a classic car. Dining here felt like stepping onto a movie set or into a kid's fever dream. Every table had a different theme, and you never knew who would burst out singing or start a skit next. Kids and grown-ups alike loved the unpredictable energy, where dinner wasn't just food, it was part costume party, part improv comedy. You went for the steak, but you stayed for the story. Safe House. Shh! You're being watched. At Milwaukee's Safe House, espionage was the name of the game. Hidden behind an unmarked door and only accessible with a secret password, Safe House was a full-on spy experience. Think secret passageways, trapdoors, code names, and decor straight out of a Cold War thriller. The staff played along, and you might find yourself passing a clearance test just to get in. Inside, the walls were lined with spy gadgets, and martinis were delivered by pneumatic tube. For kids and grown-ups alike, the thrill was in the mystery. More escape room than restaurant, with food and drinks as your cover. It wasn't just about what was on the menu, but how you'd sneak in, eat, and escape. Al Johnson's Swedish Restaurant. Forget plastic sheep or cardboard cows. At Al Johnson's Swedish Restaurant in Sister Bay, Wisconsin, real live goats grazed on the sod roof above diners' heads. This roadside spot, inspired by the owner's Swedish heritage, looks straight out of a Scandinavian fairy tale. Inside, you'd find log cabin decor, Swedish pancakes, and a boutique selling Nordic souvenirs. But the real star was outside, where tourists craned their necks to watch the goats and even checked the goat cam online. It was pure Americana, half folk art, half animal attraction, and all deliciously weird. Kids begged to visit, parents snapped photos. The goats made this one of the most iconic and certainly oddest restaurant stops in the Midwest. The Varsity. Drive-in diners were everywhere in the 1970s, but none matched the sheer scale and energy of the Varsity in Atlanta. Spanning 2 city blocks, the Varsity was part restaurant, part stadium, and part Southern legend. Inside, the staff shouted their own quirky lingo, "What'll you have?" while serving up hot dogs, chili, and frosted orange drinks. Presidents dropped by, and families treated it as a pilgrimage. The spectacle was as much in the crowds, the noise, and the traditions as in the food itself. With its own slang, rituals, and a never-ending river of customers, the Varsity was more performance art than fast food. Mai Restaurant. Imagine dining in the South Seas, surrounded by tiki torches, waterfalls, and Polynesian dancers. At Fort Lauderdale's Mai, you didn't just eat, you were transported to an island fantasy. The 8 themed dining rooms were filled with bamboo, tribal masks, and authentic Pacific artifacts. The bar served flaming cocktails, and the Polynesian Islander Review was the longest-running show of its kind in America. Families, tourists, and honeymooners all flocked to this immersive, escapist oasis. For many, the highlight was the dramatic stage shows, equal parts dinner and theater. The Mai wasn't just a meal, it was a full-blown getaway from reality. Bubble room, Christmas all year, trains running above your head, walls packed with vintage toys. Florida's Bubble Room was every kid's wildest dream come true. Opened in 1979, it transformed a tiny cafe into a 3-story explosion of color, kitsch, and nostalgia. Every room had its own quirky theme, from Hollywood memorabilia to twinkling holiday lights and glowing bubble lamps. The menu was just as outrageous: giant slices of cake, sticky buns, and whimsical names for every dish. Servers in zany hats and holiday outfits carried trays through a wonderland that felt more like a living toy museum than a restaurant. The Bubble Room made Over the Top feel like an understatement. Victoria Station. What could be more fun than eating inside a real train car? Victoria Station, with locations nationwide, brought railroad nostalgia to life. Diners sat in converted rail cars, sipped drinks at a bar made from train parts, and ordered steaks from conductors in uniform. The whole place felt like a cross-country journey without ever leaving your city. The decor included railway memorabilia, vintage suitcases, and brass luggage racks. It was a favorite for families, travelers, and anyone who wanted dinner with a side of time travel. Sadly, as the railroad boom faded, so did Victoria Station, but its memory is still on track. Jolly Time Doughnut Shop. Who says donuts should be simple? Jolly Time Doughnut Shop, a mall food court experiment, went full psychedelic in both decor and menu. Here, donuts came in wild colors and outlandish toppings, more like a candy store than a bakery. The shop was a riot of neon colors, oversized displays, and a sense of excess that defined the 70s. Their donuts were piled high with frosting, sprinkles, and even more sugar on top. The experience was a sugar rush from start to finish. While donut lovers eventually craved more artisanal fare, Jolly Time's maximalist vision remains a perfect snapshot of a decade that had no idea when to stop. Banana Republic's Wild Fruit Shack. Long before the name meant safari shirts, Banana Republic's Wild Fruit Shack was a bizarre experiment in mall dining. Imagine walking into a food court and being hit with the aroma of grilled pineapple and papaya tacos, fruit salads, and a wild attempt at healthy eating. The menu combined exotic fruits with taco shells, meats, and odd sauces in ways that made sense only in the 1970s. The decor was a tropical jungle, palm fronds, bright colors, and a theme that went just a little too far. Ultimately, the fruit-meat mashups never caught on, but this shack remains a legend in food court weirdness. Sirloin Express. Picture this: fast food steak. That was the bold vision behind Sirloin Express, a food court chain that tried to turn steak dinners into a cafeteria-style, quick-service experience. The menu promised hearty, steak-centric meals in minutes, but the reality was a long way from a classic steakhouse. Tough, chewy cuts of beef and bland sides left customers unimpressed, but the idea was so audacious that people couldn't help but try it at least once. Sirloin Express proved that some things, like fine steak, just don't work at mall speed. But you have to admire their guts for trying. Red Barn. How about a fast food joint shaped like a giant red barn? Red Barn, a chain popular across the country, leaned hard into its rural, farm-themed vibe. The buildings looked like oversized barns with quirky mascots including the Big Fish and Barnbuster burgers, and an atmosphere that was equal parts kitschy and comforting. The menu was classic American, but the novelty of eating in a barn drew families and road trippers alike. It's a reminder that sometimes gimmicks work, at least for a little while. Arthur Treachers' Fish and Chips. Step inside and you'd be greeted by British flags, portraits of English royalty, and a menu packed with fried fish, hush puppies, and thick-cut fries. Arthur Treachers brought the feel of a British pub to the American strip mall, complete with Union Jack decor and quirky touches. Kids loved the fish and chips baskets. Adults came for the cozy, pub-like atmosphere. For a while, the chain flourished, especially as a quirky alternative to burgers and fries. It was the closest many Americans ever got to London, right in their own hometown, Howard Johnson's. More than a restaurant, Howard Johnson's was a way station for generations of American travelers. The bright orange roof was a beacon for families crisscrossing the country. Everyone knew you could stop for fried clams, burgers, and, of course, 28 flavors of ice cream. The dining room was part diner, part theme park, with retro booths, chrome accents, and a homey, reliable menu. Hojo's wasn't wacky in the sense of indoor lagoons, but the sheer scope of its branding and its place in road trip lore made it an essential piece of 70s-themed dining culture. Samos. Before controversy closed its doors, Samos was a pancake house and diner chain known for its circus-like, children's storybook themes. The walls were covered in murals, and every visit felt like stepping into a whimsical illustrated story. Bottomless coffee, towering stacks of pancakes, and a family fun vibe brought in breakfast lovers from all walks of life. The branding, however, proved problematic and led to the chain's downfall. For better or worse, Samos remains a symbol of how the 1970s pushed the limits on restaurant identity. Burger Chef. At its peak, Burger Chef was one of McDonald's biggest competitors, thanks in part to its zany, kid-focused atmosphere. The Works Bar let you pile on toppings, and kids' meals come with wacky toys. Mascots and colorful buildings helped Burger Chef stand out in the fast food wars. The menu was full of variety, from burgers to fried chicken and fish sandwiches. It was fun, family-friendly, and unapologetically playful. A place where the customer wasn't just right, they were invited to play along. ChiChi's. Looking for a Tex-Mex party? ChiChi's delivered with endless chips, margaritas, mariachi bands, and bright decor that turned every dinner into a fiesta. Birthday guests got to wear a massive sombrero and pose for a Polaroid. The menu was loaded with Americanized Mexican classics, chimichangas, nachos, and cheese-smothered everything. It wasn't authentic, but it was outrageously festive, and for a while, it brought the flavor and flair of the border to suburbs everywhere. Lums. Hot dogs steamed in beer in a tavern-like setting? That was Lums. Part bar, part diner. Lums boasted a menu full of bar food gone wild. Chili dogs, fried clams, and sandwiches with every imaginable topping. The real draw was the atmosphere. Dark wood paneling, a friendly bar, and the unmistakable aroma of beer-boiled hot dogs. At its peak, Lums was a road trip favorite. A quirky oasis for travelers and locals looking for something just a little offbeat. York Steakhouse. Last, but definitely not least, York Steakhouse brought the banquet hall fantasy to mall food courts. Designed to look like a medieval castle, complete with wood paneling, stained glass accents, and hearty steak and potato plates, York aimed for upscale vibes on a budget. Customers ordered cafeteria style and found themselves eating in a setting that felt somewhere between a Knight's dining hall and a shopping mall cafeteria. The concept was a little confusing, but no one could deny that York Steakhouse had flair. From goats on rooftops to thunder rumbling over your tiki drink, the 1970s theme restaurant boom was a glorious, unpredictable experiment. These weren't just places to eat. They were immersive worlds, full of character and chaos. Some live on in memory, a few in revival, but all of them changed the way we think about dining out. Which of these bizarre wonders do you remember? Which would you want to visit? Drop your stories in the comments, subscribe for more trips down memory lane, and never forget, in the world of 70s restaurants, there was no such thing as too much.